Welcome to the Voice of Canada. Subscribe to our link to learn our latest news daily. Today, we are going to talk about inadmissibility in Canada, about Canada's voice, what it means to be inadmissible. Some people aren't allowed to come to Canada. They are inadmissible under Canada's immigration law. A Canadian immigration officer will decide if you can enter Canada when you apply for a visa or an electronic travel authorization, or when you arrive at a port of entry. There are different reasons to not let you enter to Canada, such as security, criminal and medical reasons. If you are inadmissible to Canada, normally, if you are inadmissible to Canada, you won't be allowed to enter the country. If you have a valid reason to travel to Canada that is justified in the circumstances, we may issue you a temporary resident permit. If you have committed or been convicted of a crime, you have a few options to overcome your criminal inadmissibility. Penalties for driving while impaired. If you drive while impaired by alcohol or drugs, including cannabis, you may be inadmissible for serious criminality, and this means you won't be able to enter or stay in Canada unless we issue you a temporary residence permit. You will have to pay the Canada's $200 processing fee for the permit, and there is no guarantee you will be allowed to enter or stay in the country. Reasons you may be inadmissible to Canada. A Canadian immigration officer will decide if you can enter Canada when you apply for a visa or an electronic travel authorization, or when you arrive at the port of entry. If you are found inadmissible, you will be denied a visa or an electronic travel authorization, refused entry to or removed from Canada. You could be found inadmissible for a number of reasons, such as security reasons, including espionage, subversion, attempts to overthrow a government, etc., violence or terrorism, membership in an organization involved in any of these, human or international rights violations, including war crimes, crimes against humanity, being a senior official in a government, engaged in gross human rights violations or subject to international sanctions, committing a crime, including driving while under the influence of drugs or alcohol, organized crime, including membership in an organization that takes part in organized criminal activity, people smuggling or money laundering, medical reasons. This includes medical conditions that endanger public health, endanger public safety, or causes excessive demand on health or social services. Some applicants are exempt. Financial reasons, if you are unable or unwilling to support yourself and your family members. Misrepresentation, which includes providing false information or withholding information directly related to decisions made under the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, the IRPA, failure to comply with any provision of IRPA or having an inadmissible family member. To find out more, see Overcoming Criminal Inadmissibility. Examples of failure to comply with IRPA include temporary residents who don't respect the conditions of their stay. For example, they stay longer than allowed or work or study without the proper permits. Permanent residents who haven't lived in Canada for the required amount of time, people who have previously been deported and try to enter Canada without written authorization. In some cases, you may need an authorization to return to Canada, ARC. In order to be admitted to Canada, what to do if you are inadmissible? If you have a valid reason to travel to Canada, if you are otherwise inadmissible but have a reason to travel to Canada that is justified in the circumstances, you may be issued a temporary resident permit. To be eligible for a temporary residence permit, your need to enter or stay in Canada must outweigh the health or safety risks to Canadian society, as determined by an immigration or a border services officer. Even if the reason you are inadmissible seems minor, you must demonstrate that your visit is justified. There is no guarantee that you will be issued a temporary residence permit. How to apply for a temporary residence permit? If you are a citizen of an ETA required country, your application for an ETA was refused, you may be issued a temporary residence permit. This depends on the nature and circumstances of the inadmissibility and the why you need to travel to Canada. The visa office responsible for your country or region may have its own application form for temporary residence permits. You should check the visa office to find out exactly how to apply. If you are a visa required, you must apply for a visitor visa and include supporting documents to explain why you are inadmissible and what it may be justified for you to enter Canada. You may have to attend an interview so that an officer can access your application. How long you can stay in Canada? A temporary resident permit is usually issued for the length of your visit to Canada. For example, 1 week to attend a conference, you must leave Canada by the expiry date of the permit or get a new permit before your current one expires. This permit may be cancelled by an officer at any time. The permit is no longer valid once you leave Canada unless you have specifically been authorized to leave and re-enter. Fees. You must pay a fee, Canadian $200, to cover the cost of processing your application for a temporary residence permit. The fee will not be refunded if the permit is refused. Pay your fees online. If you have committed or been convicted of a crime, you have a few options to overcome your criminal inadmissibility. Penalties for driving while impaired. If you drive while impaired by alcohol or drugs, including cannabis, you may be inadmissible for some criminality. This means you won't be able to enter or stay in Canada unless we issue you a temporary residence permit. Overcome criminal convictions. A Canadian immigration officer will decide if you can enter Canada when you apply for a visa, an electronic travel authorization, or when you arrive at the port of entry. Under Canada's immigration law, if you have committed or been convicted of a crime, you may not be allowed into Canada. In other words, you may be criminally inadmissible. This includes both minor and serious crimes such as theft, assault, manslaughter, dangerous driving, driving while under the influence of drugs or alcohol, and possession of a trafficking in drugs or controlled substances. If you can find a list of criminal offenses in the Criminal Code of Canada and the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act, if you were convicted of a crime when you were under the age of 18, you may still be able to enter to Canada. What you can do, depending on the crime, how long it was, and how you have been behaved since, you may still be allowed to come to Canada if you convince an immigration officer that you meet the legal terms to be deemed rehabilitated or apply for rehabilitation and were approved or were granted a record suspension or have a temporary residence permit. Deemed rehabilitation. Deemed rehabilitation under Canada's immigration law means that enough time has passed since you were convicted that your crime may no longer bar you from entering Canada. You may be deemed rehabilitated dependent on the crime if enough time has passed since you finished serving the sentence for the crime and if you have committed more than one crime. In all cases, you may only be deemed rehabilitated if the crime committed outside Canada has a maximum prison term of less than 10 years if committed in Canada. Individual rehabilitation. Rehabilitation means that you are not likely to commit new crimes. You can apply for individual rehabilitation to enter Canada. The minister or their delegate may decide to grant it or not. To apply, you must show that you meet the criteria, have been rehabilitated, and be highly unlikely to take part in the further crimes. Also, at least 5 years must have been passed since the end of your criminal sentence. This includes probation and the day you committed the act that made you inadmissible. If you are applying for criminal rehabilitation along with your temporary residence, visitor visa, study permit, or work permit application, you can submit everything together and apply at the nearest visa application center. If you are a foreign national who needs an electronic travel authorization, you have to submit a separate application for criminal rehabilitation before you apply for your ETA. You can do so by following the procedures below. Once you have received confirmation of your rehabilitation, you may apply for an ETA. If you apply for your ETA before you receive your rehabilitation, your application will be assessed based on the information currently available and may result in the refusal of your application. If you are submitting a separate application for criminal rehabilitation, you must complete the application and submit it directly to the visa office responsible for your region by mail or courier only. You must also pay a processing fee. Note, these applications can take over a year to process. Make sure you plan for enough in advance of your travel to Canada. Record suspension or discharge. If you have been convicted in Canada and want to apply for a record suspension, formerly known as a pardon, check with Parole Board of Canada. If you get a Canadian record suspension, you will no longer be inadmissible. If you receive a record suspension or a discharge for your conviction in another country, check with the visa office that serves the country or region where you live. It will tell you if the pardon is valid in Canada. This will help make sure that when you arrive in Canada, a border services office has enough information to decide if you can enter Canada. The officer will still check to make sure you are not inadmissible for other reasons. Temporary residence permit. A temporary resident permit lets you enter or stay in Canada if it has been less than 5 years since the end of your sentence, or you have valid reasons to be in Canada, or if you have a valid reason to travel to Canada, but you are inadmissible. You may issue you a temporary residence permit. An immigration or border services officer will decide if your need to enter or stay in Canada outweighs the health or safety risks to Canadian society. Even if the reasons you are inadmissible seems minor, you must not show that your visit is valid. And ladies and gentlemen, this is all our news for today. Subscribe and follow our link to receive all our newest news daily. Thank you for following.